Hello, and welcome to Sip, Sip, Hooray, the podcast for wine lovers and the wine curious, where we share some of our favorite tips and sips from the world of wine. On today's podcast, the story of a winery that has roots back to the gold rush. We are at Boeger Winery in Dorado County, where the original owners of this estate first arrived to strike it rich in gold. What they discovered instead was that there was a more fruitful fortune to be made in fruits and nuts. That same soil is now planted with grapevines and home to Boeger Winery. The Boeger family has its own deep history with winemaking, and in fact, the winery that they established here in 1972 became the first modern era or post-prohibition winery in Dorado County. We are delighted to have Justin Boeger on the podcast with us today. We're the two Marys who like to eat, drink, and be merry. I'm Mary Babbitt.
I'm Mary Orland. Sip Sip Hooray is here on location at Boeger Winery. Visiting Boeger is like stepping back in time, surrounded by rolling hills dotted by vines, where you'll still find the original 1872 gravity-fed winery, along with the modern winery and tasting room tucked in among the trees. The family celebrates its story and the history of El Dorado wine country, where liquid gold flows from the vineyard to the glass. We're excited to be here with a view of the barrel room with second-generation vintner Justin Boeger to learn about this exciting wine region, how the Boegers kicked off the post-prohibition winemaking era, and all about Boeger's signature grape, Barbera. Justin, welcome to Sip Sip Hooray.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. And thanks, actually, you coming here to me. I really love that. Thanks. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, as our listeners know, we don't always get to go on location, so this is exciting for us.
Awesome.
And a great time of year to be here. It is spring, and the hills are so green. Everything is lovely. We saw turkeys, a small flock of turkeys as we were driving in, so it's really nice to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. And you mentioned the green hills, and my wife always noticed she came from the East Coast, and she first came out here in the summer and thought how brown it was. And I said, oh no, those are amber hills. And of course, it's so green in the winter and spring. It's really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So this is definitely in your blood. Fourth generation?
Yeah, that's right. My great-grandfather started a winery in Napa, Nicolini Winery. That was started in 1890. They're actually the second oldest continuously run family winery continuously run by the same family in the state, I believe, is what it is, or at least in Napa.
Wow. Cool. So for our listeners not familiar with the Sierra Foothills region and winemaking here, can you set the scene for us and set the scene for Boeger?
Yeah, what really drew my parents here in the first place was just the sheer beauty of the scenery around, and of course this was a historic winery from the 1800s. So when they first set down here, the original the immigrants who homesteaded here were from the Mediterranean, so there were fig trees here that are 100-year-old fig trees growing, and it was just this beautiful scenery. The greater surrounding area, especially of El Dorado, is just the varied terrain. We have a huge elevation difference between the lowest level of the AVA and the highest level, and with all these varied exposures and air drainages that really make this region unique in a way that we can grow grapes that are cool region grapes. There's little pockets throughout the county that are cool, very cool regions. There's other hilltops where there's a lot of air drainage, and the warm air sits there as well. And so you have warm regions. And so it's just such a beautiful, varied area where we can grow practically, not to use too much hyperbole, but really it feels like we can grow almost any grape variety here. I think we have something like 70 or more grape varieties that are growing here.
Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, the microclimates that you speak of. So one part of a hillside will warm up before another, and you have all the different soil types. I know I've heard of volcanic soil around here. Yeah,
it's a wonderful opportunity, and it's a logistical challenge and nightmare at times, because what it is you've got so many small areas where you can grow. You don't see very many vineyards that are more than 5 or 10 acres to the same grape variety here in the county, because from one part of a 70-acre parcel to the other, in examples, some of our Barbera, one vineyard we used to farm, the hilltop would ripen 3 weeks before the bottom of the hill. And so the logistics of, actually, it was kind of nice because we didn't have to get 100 tons of fruit off in 2 days. But also you mentioned the soil types, so even within our 50-acre parcel right here, there's little fingers or peninsulas of different soil types that come into surrounding almost like a sea of maybe more fertile soil, and that provides its own challenges for how you irrigate and just the vine vigor, but it also creates these wonderfully nuanced, 20% of one vineyard has more spice character than the remaining 80% because the soil is different. And it just makes this wonderful palette of precursor flavors that come in the fruit that you don't necessarily know exactly what you're going to get, but that's what makes it so fun. Is it's just this exciting, like, what magic am I going to get this season to play with? And of course, each growing year is different. And so those different compounds are amplified or diminished, and it just makes it just a sheer joy to deal with here. I'm not an artist at all. I'm a scientist, but I found my calling in wine because it's like being artistic, using science to express it. And so I really feel my inner artist come out during the harvest time when I get to play with these wonderful fruit that's grown up here.
I love that.
That is so great. So since we've been here in the Sierra foothills, we've heard about a flavor characteristic described as Sierra spice. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, Sierra spice, it's actually really funny that you're asking me about Sierra spice because my whole philosophy, I grew up in wine. My parents started, I grew up with it. And so for me, wine has always been just something that's on the table that brings people and friends and good food together. And so I didn't come to wine by way of, a lot of other people have come in by they find this wonderful product in a glass and they're drawn to these, picking out the individual flavors and aromas. And so they love, that's their favorite thing to talk about. For me, wine was always actually just a secondary thing on the table that was part of all these great memories and great experiences. And so when I talk about wine, I actually have a really hard time telling people what I think wine smells like or tastes like. And I always leave it to other people to say. Like, I would be curious when you taste, after you taste these, what you think the Sierra spice is. That being said, it is sort of, we as a group, where there's a group of us that taste wines every month, our wines, to just find these common threads. And what we have called Sierra spice is this common thread that we seem to find ranging from hints to large amounts throughout all of our wines. And we just think it is the spice character that's reflective of something unique up here, whether it's in the trees or the soil, but there is some common element up there. Hard to identify where it comes from, but we call it Sierra spice because it's unique to here.
Well, you get out of the car here after driving up from the Bay Area where I live, and the air smells fresh. There's a difference. There's a mountain quality to this area, which I imagine lends itself in the glass and gives that is part of the magic you speak of. But I also wonder, what are the challenges of being up in the Sierra foothills and away from kind of the magnetic pull to Napa and Sonoma as the wine country of Northern California?
Yeah. First, I'm going to say one thing. As I said, I don't like to talk about aromas and stuff. Sierra spice is El Dorado. So if you try this and you're wondering what this unique thing is, that is El Dorado. In terms of what's it like being here, sort of in the, out of the valley, bit removed from the historic center of winemaking in California. It's really wonderful in many ways. We get to we're in our own area and get to sort of craft our own way and set our own tone. I always found it interesting when El Dorado AVA started, and we started up here in 1972 and followed by wineries like Madroña within a year, and Sierra Vista and Lava Cap, and At the beginning, there were just a few of us, and it was a real risk to come to this unknown region, except that we had known that historically it had been a hugely successful wine region towards the end of the gold rush era in particular. And it was a risk to come up here, but it was the chance to be able to say, I want to make wine the way I want to make it without any no neighbors around me that already have a style or something said. So we got to really literally craft our own way and make the wine exactly how, in my parents' case, how they wanted to drink it. And luckily, I guess enough people wanted to drink the same style of wine they wanted to drink that it helped us be successful. So that's been really a wonderful opportunity and a strength. It's also been really difficult because when we started, it wasn't yet cool to be a new region. It's kind of like, I don't have any specific examples, but the feeling when I hear about my parents and some of the other early pioneers up here talking about starting up here, it was kind of like if you had a media interview, the lead off question would be something kind of like, well, what were you thinking?
Are you crazy?
Why would you go out of branch out of the most famous wine region and try to do something on your own? And maybe it's kind of like the answer might have been still because we can. And so that was really wonderful. But that's always historically been a challenge for marketing. And then by the time everyone was starting to look for to explore other regions, like, okay, we love Napa, but wow, there's this new region down in, who knows, I don't want to name any because I'll get the order wrong, right? But, whatever region that's kind of newer, and then people started looking for new regions. And then El Dorado's like, hey, this is great. And the people, oh, El Dorado, you guys have been around forever. So we were before our time, we sort of missed the boat or just were before our time. We started a new region. It wasn't cool yet to be a new region. By the time people were looking for new regions, we were old hats. So, so that's always been a challenge, but we don't stop fighting, because like with me personally, my passion for sharing something that I've created, with people who want to enjoy it, is what drives us. My overarching philosophy when I make wine and share wine and pour wine is I just want to share it with people who like wine. And that's always that's driven our pricing considerations over time.
Which I have to tell people are really reasonable. Not just you, but this whole area, the price points are much lower than you'd find in Napa and Sonoma and other places.
For me personally, just with, we did have the benefit of starting so long ago that, new wineries who come in the 2000s have different initial startup costs, so, we were able to always have lower prices early. But for me, it was just more about, boy, this wine got a really good review. We could take the price up $10 a bottle. I said, yeah, or we could just make more of it and share it with more people. And that's how I prefer to go.
Love that.
So your parents started the winery in 1972. Can you give us a brief history of what it took for them to get this started and what they found here that they built upon?
Yeah. So just, just a little bit before that, my father had grown up as when he was a teenager, he would spend his summers working with his grandfather in their Childs Valley vineyard down in Napa. And so he, from a young age, was just, and all of our family, most of them were farmers, whether it's prunes or walnuts or rice, apricots. We had a family of apricots down in the San Jose. And so my dad's whole upbringing was around farming, and he just was drawn to the grapes and grapevines and winemaking. And so he always in his head knew he wanted to make wine. And in college, he made some wine. I found just a couple cases of 1967 some varietal that he had in his cellar. It was the first wine he ever made while he was still in college.
Really?
Did you guys open it?
I can't remember if we tried it. It must not have been memorable.
If you did, I know.
But it's was pretty old. It was first try. So we do have some of our first vintages from here that we've tried, and they're still good. Great. But when my mom and dad were dating, she always, I don't know if she was drawn to it or still was drawn to my father, despite his quirk of whenever they would drive around, he'd see some old abandoned vineyard and he would just have to find out who the owner was and ask them if he could prune and fix their vineyard up, because he couldn't stand to see a neglected vine on the road. And he just loved working with vines. So he got into it probably more for even just the growing of the grapes than the winemaking itself. It's like, okay, I love growing grapes, but I guess I better make some wine.
Yeah, and have to do something with them.
He made the wine for the first 26, 7 years. So they, at some point they decided, around 1972, they were both working for the state of California. My dad was in the Department of Agriculture and my mom was a social worker. They just decided, you know what, we want to we want to start making wine and grow grapes. And even then, prices were high down in Napa. They thought, well, this is maybe out of our price range to start. I've heard about this. There was an article in the Sacramento Bee about El Dorado, the forgotten old wine region or something like that. And they read it. And it had the agricultural commissioner's name was in there, Ed Delfino. There's Edio Vineyards up here. Delfino, that's his family. They're one of the newest wineries up here. We're the oldest. They're the newest. We've got a long history with them. So my parents came up here. They tracked down Ed Delfino and started talking to him about the potential of growing grapes up here. And coincidentally, the region was looking to restart the wine industry. They were actively hoping to find someone to start growing grapes because historically it had been such a huge economic driver in the county. During the late 1800s, El Dorado was in the top 3 wine grape growing regions in the state. We've got a book somewhere that's where I get that I could cite. I don't know it off the top of my head. When you
we believe you anyway.
Anyway, so then they started just touring around places, and that's when they came here and saw the 100-year-old fig trees around the old cellar, and they sat here and had a glass of wine with the ag commissioner. And to my parents, they said, "This is just magical. It's enchanting." And they just said, "I don't even know if they looked anywhere else once they got here." And it was a pear orchard. It had historically been a vineyard. But of course, our county's thriving wine industry started going downhill during the early 1900s because mining was on the decline, and then with prohibition. And coincidentally, actually, the family lore from the family we purchased this winery from was they actually produced more wine during Prohibition because they had a contract with the Catholic Church in town, and the religious exemption allowed for some production there. Yes, that's right. And with the repeal of Prohibition, they actually stopped producing wine. And we don't know if it's because wine was commercially available again, and maybe you don't have those black market prices. Who knows? So they stopped making wine and replaced it with pears. And the whole county was mostly replaced with pears. In the 50s or 60s, some diseases came in that started affecting the pear industry, which reduced the ag was always been the primary economic driver here, and so they wanted to reinvigorate the wine industry. And just was pure coincidence that my parents read that article while they were thinking about getting started in the wine business, met the ag commissioner and the farm advisor, Dick Bethel. I have to say his name. Those two, if you hear it from my parents, they would probably say they practically twisted their arms to start up here. But my parents really did want to come up here and fell in love with this place and bought it. And they pulled out some pears, started building the winery, and crushed our first harvest. Was actually in 72 while this winery was being built. There was an old facility and some old equipment, and that had an old vineyard on it, one of the few acres that hadn't been removed, and they made Cabernet from those vines for the first couple of years while our vineyards came into production. And then, but starting in 74 or 5, we had our first vintage from our estate fruit, and it's been gangbusters ever since.
So great.
Yeah.
And did you ever have another option besides wine? Like, we're growing up in this family and with this, 4th generation history. Was there ever a consideration like, I'm gonna be a fireman? Or something?
That's a great question, because there's some debate whether I had an option or not. I grew up in it. My parents used to say I was working for my room and board. I can remember at some point the minimum wage being $3.30 an hour. I was probably 12 years old. I probably shouldn't have been working technically. It instilled in me the love for farming. I love having my hands dirty. I love being outside. The worst part of my day is if I'm have to be inside. I love the farming part. So I grew up loving the farming and simple things like tractors. I've always loved driving things, and it's been my goal in life to drive anything I can drive. And so I always loved that. But when it came time to actually make that decision, okay, I'm going to go to college and I have to pick a degree. And of course, my whole family is pretty much UC Davis alumni. Both my parents went there. My grandfather taught medicine there. There was this pressure, well, you've got to go to Davis and you're going to carry on the family tradition, right? You're the fourth generation that would be doing it. And, and I always liked it, but, there was a little part of me that thought, well, okay, even if I like it, I do have to work with family. If anyone's worked with family, it's a completely different work dynamic. I can have my job performance in my subjective opinion is evaluated differently. I might be more prone to be critiqued, but I can't get fired. They only just don't pay me, was always the joke. So I did struggle with it. And as I was making the final decision, okay, am I going to go to Davis? I also had the option. I was accepted at Cal Poly SLO, and I thought, boy, that'd be great. It's a long way away.
A little distance.
But my mom, in an attempt to reassure me that I didn't need to feel pressured to go into the wine industry, said, you don't have to go into the wine business as a career. We can always just sell the place. What I heard was, she was trying to be reassuring. What I heard was if you don't go into the wine business, we're going to sell your home. And so
I would hear it that way too.
Okay, so then I immediately applied at UC Davis and the winemaking degree. Actually, they didn't have winemaking specifically then. It was called fermentation science. So I went to UC Davis, although in a little act of passive aggressive rebellion, I didn't actually take a wine course for 3 years at UC Davis. I took a lot of the prerequisites, but I was determined to try other things. I took languages, history, sciences, physics was a big draw for me. But generally sciencey things. So that kind of drew me back to wine. When I finally did take a wine course, I kind of joked that I think I felt like, I need a GPA booster. Let me take this intro to winemaking. I'll ace that. Well, I went in there, it was not at all what I expected. It wasn't about how you make wine. It was really about what grapes were from where in the world. And so I was completely lost because at that point, that didn't interest me. I didn't care if Cabernet came from Bordeaux or what the origins of Zinfandel were. I just wanted to get an A because I knew something about making wine because I'd grown up in it. And so I think I got a C or something in my first midterm. That was, of course, I probably didn't tell my parents at all. But even for me, I was like, oh boy. But that being said, part of the class did involve wine tasting where they'd spike wines with different flavors and aromas. And that kind of piqued my interest because even if it wasn't wine, I have always loved eating. And so food, has always been good. Food has been so great. I thought, this kind of reminds me of, it was kind of just clicked like, this peachy aroma is kind of, that must be why I like this wine with this food here. And that kind of put me on the path to actually study winemaking. So then I dove in with 2 feet and I ended up doing an internship in Germany. I was in Germany for 3 to 5 months working at a couple wineries there. And, really just dove in with 2 feet. And then I finally came back here 8 years later. To my chagrin, is how long it took. But
you didn't start till 3 years in.
Well, the joke in the family is if I had just taken 3 more courses, I probably could have had 3 more different degrees. Right. So because I was taking so many things. So then I came back, and that was in 1998, and I've been back ever since. So this was my 26th harvest last year, and not looking to retire anytime soon. So, yeah.
So I got to ask, was one of those international grape varieties you were expected to know Falangina?
That's so interesting.
Which is the first wine you've poured for us. So let's try that and talk about that.
That sounds awesome. Yeah.
So tell us about Falangina. So for listeners who don't know Falangina, it's an Italian variety.
So my path to get to Falangina is a little bit different than maybe some of the other wines. This is actually the first time I've made Falangina, and oftentimes I would prefer to show you a different white wine that's one we've made for 20 or 30 or 40 years, Sauvignon Blanc being an example. But kind of in the way my parents were drawn to come up here and try something new, we grow over 30 different grape varieties ourselves. This isn't one that we grow. But we were always looking to, my dad would always plant, hey, Nebbiolo, let's try some Nebbiolo. And most of the time it's worked, but not always. Nebbiolo is one that didn't work. We planted Nebbiolo, and about only every third or fourth year was it good enough to bottle by itself. So we just grafted it and put something else that did better. Because of my internships in Germany, which is obviously predominantly white wine, I really developed an interest and respect for white wines, which I think are sometimes underappreciated here.
Mary and I are
and
big
so
fans.
so I have always been looking for new white wines to expand not only just wines that I like to drink in my own lineup, but to really highlight how El Dorado can grow lots of different white wines as well. A lot of people just think, oh, El Dorado, it's warm, it's Zinfandel and Barbera. Well, we have the cool regions where we can grow Pinot Gris, Chardonnay. We've got, and there's also white grape varietals that do well in warmer regions, like the Falangina, that naturally has high acidity. So when this came to my attention, this has grown down at the lower elevation of the El Dorado AVA at 1,200 feet elevation. So that acidity that it had, and I love acidity, but it is always nicer. I think the grower, Stephen Viani is his name, found the right spot for this particular Italian white. And I had been buying some Barbera from him, and he just came to me and said, hey, I have Falangina as well. I said, well, yeah, let's give it a try. I'm looking for some more whites, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
That's beautiful.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so lively and fresh, and with that acidity you're talking about. And I get the peach and stone fruit character and a little bit of that spice, I think.
Yeah. So I just, and I love whites, and the Falangina, and I have found actually coincidentally why Falangina is, as I've been an adult, I have convoluted ways of getting to the point, but that's always connected to a story. In college, everyone called me the storyteller. But when we go out to dinner anywhere as a family, if it's the family, my dad is guaranteed to order our wine. He orders our wine. He makes sure it's prominently placed in the center of the table with the label facing outward so that anyone walking in or by will see Boeger Barbera, for example. And he usually makes a point to be, he always knows the owner, especially if it's local or any. And then next thing you know, the owners are recommending our wine. You'll see our wine come out, and my dad uses it as a marketing opportunity.
That's funny.
When I'm there, I'm usually historically have been like, no way I'm going to order my own wine. They might see that when I pay that it's my own wine and think, I'm too good for other people's wine. And so I always try other wines, and whether it's from the region to just see what because I don't know if it's surprising or not, but as a winemaker, I don't get out and taste all the other wines around here all that often. So restaurants are a good place for me to do that. I have, in the short part, then to make it shorter, I've always been drawn to, I've found over time, I really like trying white wines and, or reds as well, but I've started going towards Italy more and more. I love Spanish wines as well. I love French wines. I love Cabernet. I love all wine. But I have just found myself, what I'm saying is I have found that our particular terroir and our micro part of our region, the Italian varietals do really well. So our Italian reds have done well historically. So I thought, well, I'm going to do an Italian white.
That is interesting for people to know.
So that's how I got to it. That I think our region, the vineyards that we've sourced from, the Italian varietals have done best. And that's sort of become, we went from when we started, it was Cabernet, Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, because we might have been crazy to go out of Napa to start our winery, but we were not so crazy that we were not going to make Cabernet and Chardonnay and all the wines that people were buying. Right?
Follow the formula.
But as we've gone over time, for our particular site, the Italian varietals, time and time again, tend to be the ones that really the region, or our vineyards in particular, highlight well.
Well, I feel like that's so important for our listeners to know. And I think there are a lot of people looking for different varietals like Italian. And these are the things that make wine fun when you make new discoveries. Like, wow, I never tried a Falangina, didn't know I would like it. And heck, I love it. So I love that about it. And I also, this is probably no secret to you either, but white wine is really having a moment. People are really discovering a love of white wine, and some of it is lower alcohol whites.
Yep.
And so this It's good timing to be dipping your toes in the Falangina pool.
Yep.
Yes,
I have. Well, I guess I'm just thrilled that that I get to make these white wines, and if it's having a bit of a comeback, that's great because I really like to show them. I love all the red wines too, and I might even drink red wines more often, but I always just loved it, especially when it starts getting warmer, just to say, hey, let's just start off with a little bit about this. It's so refreshing by itself with a little bit of cheese, however you want it. It's great.
Well, I think you need to keep making this Falangina.
Well, thank you very much. I think that is definitely in the cards.
Good. You mentioned your family's German roots and your last name, Boeger. Tell us what that means in German and about the label design and how that relates.
I will. The first thing I'll say, though, is, of course, most people in wine think French. And so when they see the name Boeger, they're thinking French, and they'll say Boeger sometimes, which is fine. With my first name being Justin, if someone says Boeger, I just say, fine, mais oui, je suis Justin Boeger, and go from there. It sounds a lot nicer than the Ich bin Justus Boeger.
Sure.
In German, it sounds, German, everything is hard to say sometimes. But yes, it is German. Boeger means archer or bow maker, like bowyer in English. And in fact, when I did my internships in Germany, I went back to where my great-grandfather was born and found the city where our particular branch of the family originated, and found this place called Boegerhof. It's been a while since I've been there. My German pronunciation, I'm sorry for anyone out there who speaks German. It's horrible. My pronunciation's horrible right now. Love it. My family that I was saying, we've got to meet this guy. He could be a relative. And so he goes and we flags down the guy who's out in a fish pond in Waders, and he comes on out, and my family, who is also named Boeger there, said, hey, I've got a guest here from California. His family name's Boeger. His great-grandfather emigrated from here. What do you know about the Boegers? He said, oh, I have a whole book. And he opens up goes in his house, pulls out this book. It says the title is Boeger Family History from 1280.
Come on.
Whoa, no way.
So we find a common ancestor around 1700. There's a common ancestor, so this guy's related to me. And then it goes all the way back to 1280, and it's the story of the first Boeger from the region, who was an archer in the service of a earl that was the earl that was in charge of the land around there, who was having a dispute with a bishop who had, back then the bishops had their own armies. And so during this dispute, the bishop sent his army to conquer this earl's castle, and the first Boeger, Cord Boeger, who was the head of the archers, was on the battlements and supposedly killed enough of the enemy they couldn't take the castle. So the earl rewarded him with a 750-acre fish farm, which is where we were standing.
Wow.
So he was the direct descendant from this Boeger from 1280, and we're related. And so I took that home. That history gave me a copy, took it home.
That's pretty powerful.
Cool. So this theme of archer and the name meaning archer, that really impacted me. Before that, we didn't have any of these arrowheads on the label.
Okay.
We don't put a lot of effort into explaining it on the label necessarily. It's almost more of an inside joke, you might almost say.
Okay.
But the arrow on the labels, whether it's the wraparound or this other, our more reserve label that has the vertical arrows that look like spears, is just our nod to our history. That then when someone asks about, Boeger, you say, no, actually it's German, it's Boeger, it means archer. And then, oh, is that why the arrows? And then it just starts that conversation. And goes from there. So that's the history of the why we have the arrow prominent on the label.
And your sister does the labels.
That's right. My sister is a artist, fine artist, graphic design artist. So she does all the packaging, and so that's her design. Yes.
So good, very pretty. She's talented.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So we have another wine to try.
This Falangina, though, thank you. That was great.
I alluded to it as the winery's signature grape.
This is the Barbera?
That's right. So this is our Barbera. This is 2023. This is our estate Barbera. Barbera is what we're most known for at Boeger. We first produced Barbera in 1976, and this was an example of where my dad saw an abandoned vineyard out in Placer County. They were out on a trip somewhere, and my dad found this abandoned vineyard. And turns out it was Barbera. He found out who the owner was, said, "Hey, can I resurrect your vineyard and some way or another?" And so he ended up doing that, and then they had some agreement where my dad got to take the grapes, and so we made our first Barbera in 1976, and loved it, the result, so much that we decided we need to make Barbera from here on out. So we did. We had a year or two gap while we started sourcing our own Barbera closer to where we live, and then eventually planted our own vineyards. But, at the time, we were one of the few wineries making Barbera. The one vineyard we did source from initially, they were sending some Barbera down to Amador. But one year, either I don't remember if the winery didn't need any more or he just had excess, we got our foot in the door. And then 4 years later, we were actually leasing the vineyard ourselves and making it ever since. So early on, it just was so successful with our customers, and we got good ratings. And so for years and years, Barbera, that just became synonymous with Boeger wine. And that's by far our biggest production. It's what most people who know our winery all know the Barbera already. And that's a big reason why they come here. And for me, Barbera is one of those wines that I always love taking at places. It's the wine I bring to a gathering when I don't know what's being served.
Yes, because it's so flexible.
Yes, it's so flexible. It goes with to me, one of the widest range of foods, depending on the particular vintage or vineyard. It's great by itself or with food, whether you're new to wine or been drinking it for years. There's always something to appreciate in Barbera. And I've just made that a highlight and mission and core of our winemaking is to make Barbera. I go to a lot of lengths to, I always talk about, I really try to respect the grapes and listen to what they're telling me when they come in. And I try to make my wine, I try to make sure it's just really reflective of how the grapes want to be made. When you try my wines, you won't find much oak in there, for example, because for me, oak's not something that's in the fruit. Not to say there's no place for oak, but I want, when you taste any of my wines, but the Barbera, and we're talking about the Barbera, this is what Barbera tastes like from El Dorado, but from our particular 5 soil types in the different vineyards we're making. And, Barbera is always challenging because it tends to have high acidity.
Right.
And so the tendency when making Barbera is, I can remember as a kid, you'd get it in, it'd come in super ripe, because if you didn't have so much acidity that it'd take the enamel off your teeth, or you'd have to de-acidify the wine, which is a little bit of manipulation that, I also try to, I don't want to manipulate the wines anymore. I try to, maybe it was my time in Germany, but the old German brewing laws of just yeast, water, and, and the malt, the grains. With wine, I just want to have grapes and yeast.
Yeah.
And so I achieve all my blending and balancing by when I pick and which vineyard gets picked when, and the final blend and lots of different yeast strains. But I'm always just I want a final product that is just balanced, not overpowering, and it's not trying to be made like a Zinfandel,
It's interesting. I didn't know that about Barbera, that it was super acidic, because when I taste this, you get a really balanced mouthful, and there is an acidic piece of it, but nothing that's off-putting. It's actually really mouth friendly. And you get a lot of the just delicious fruit. Really gorgeous wine.
And the nice thing now, especially with Barbera, is, of course, when we first started, there was just the one vineyard. It was one clone of Barbera that happened to be a highest acid clone. So I can remember my dad bringing in fruit around 28 or 30 bricks sugar, and how do you deal with that? And that's, we routinely, our Barberas were 15.5% alcohol, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, especially then, actually, when we were making it the first time. The bigger the wine, the better.
Right.
Now I'm finding it easier to sell more balanced wines than, I kind of like my dad. My dad was, making wines like that. And I always I want to make wines more balanced. And well, that's great, but try and sell it.
Yeah.
And that was always the thing. You want to try something new, go ahead, try and sell it. When I came back from Germany, I made a dry Riesling. he said, go ahead, try and sell, because our Riesling was sweet. And I made 800 cases. It was great. There was about 100 people that really loved it. And everyone else said, oh, that's too dry. Took forever to sell. So, but now...
times have changed.
Yeah. Oh, so the point was with the different clones. So we have planted different clones, lower acid clones, which allows me to harvest the fruit at a lower sugar level and still have the right amount of acidity. So I don't have to add acid. I never have to deacidify anymore, and I get to have Barberas that are just really balanced. And this is really one of my, people ask me, what's your favorite wine? Well, I have 5 or so favorite wines. It's a revolving list depending on my mood and the weather and everything else. But Barbera is always in there.
That's great. I mean, this is such an inviting wine. It's really soft and kind of plush, and you get a lot of bright cherry, and it's just easy drinking. And
yeah. The other thing, we've read some, there's some study published some years ago about how, most wine consumed in the United States is consumed within a few weeks of purchase.
Right. Or even a day or two.
Yeah, or maybe even a day or on
the minute you get home from the market or wherever.
And some wines, there's a dry, if you, like me personally, I don't mind drinking some older wines, but it is a lot harder to sell, right? Well, the lucky thing with Barbera I have found is that when you make it ready to consume soon after bottling, many, many times, because of the uniqueness of the varietal, and in particular our soils and stuff up here that are contributing whatever they are to the wine, they can also age really, really well. And about 4 years ago, I had opened up a bottle of our first Barbera from 1976, not having necessarily any great expectations, maybe because my expectations were a little lower, but opened it up and it was phenomenal. It was 40 years old or something like, I can't remember, so my math is also not great, but anyways, really has held up. And Barbera, when made with where the acidity is prominent, it just can age really well. And so, you can buy Barbera and, get enough that you can drink it over 7 years and you'll be really pleasantly surprised.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You have one more wine to share with us, and I want to make sure we get to it before we start running out of time.
Yep.
Yeah.
After we talk about this wine, I also want you to tell us about, you're also a dad and a busy guy with your family, yeah?
Yes, that's right. So I have 2 daughters, and Hazel and Lillian, and they have so far expressed no desire to go into the wine business. And maybe because it's the way I was brought up, I have got no intention to push them.
Sure.
Not that I was pushed, I'll reiterate again.
But they're still young.
They're still young. Yeah, they're middle schoolers. But I mean, when I was in middle or even younger, I could probably in elementary school, I can remember I just loved throwing the grapes into the crusher and watching the wheels smash the grapes, and it was fascinating for me. My kids, they could care less about the grapes being smashed. But in fact, one of them could be a budding engineer and artist, and the other one is already decided she wants to be a marine biologist. Is set on going to University of Hawaii. I'm trying to convince her to at least pick Santa Barbara, which is closer, or even UC Davis. UC Davis, there's nothing wrong with UC Davis. They have a marine program.
5th generation.
Yeah, that's right. That being said, I do expose them to my work. I bring, the other day I had one of them in, and actually they were finally starting to ask, oh, what are you doing? I was in the lab and mixing something around with some colors and stuff. And so if they show interest, I will definitely cultivate it and see. And then so this final wine here is, it's a proprietary blend. We call it Migliore, Italian once again. I don't speak Italian very well, but my understanding was that if the word migliore, if it was il migliore, means the best, and but migliore by itself means better. And we thought, okay, that's more in line. We don't want to say we're the best, but maybe this migliore is just a little bit better, but really not in reference to the quality of the wine itself. And this is a better wine than others out there, but really as to highlight the fact that sometimes blending 2 wines makes a better wine than the 2 individual components. And the Europeans know this, right? When we all made Cabernet in the 70s, if you're in Europe, you're in France, you're drinking Bordeaux, which isn't only just Cabernet.
Exactly.
Because it's better blended. And so this was just another way of showing that blending these wines makes something that's better than the sum of its parts.
So which two grapes are
so
these?
These two varietals in this particular vintage, it's different every year. This is Negro Amaro and Sagrantino. Two typically big wines that are, the origins are southern Italy. So they like the heat, and they like the dryness. And we started with Negro Amaro because my dad was looking to plant a vineyard. We were going to do some Primitivo, and my dad happened to be at Cordy Brothers in Sacramento. The wine, Daryl Cordy, the wine buyer there, the owner, was always happy to share his knowledge with my dad. And my dad had a good relationship with him. He said, well, if you're planting Primitivo, you should plant Negro Amaro. It's typically blended together or something along those lines. So my dad said, sure, why not? And just planted Negro Amaro. Well, turned out really, really good. And our first several vintages of Negro Amaro were this, just this wonderful wine. It's my wife and I favorite wine by itself. It just is unique. And then at some point, another grower up here asked my dad for some cuttings of Negro Amaro. Hey, that sounds interesting. My dad has always been part of the reason of our success, and maybe, is my dad has always been willing to share everything he knows, which luckily my mom is more financially minded, and at some point, said, look, you can't just give everything away or we're going to go out of business. But my dad was always, you want cuttings? Sure. You want whatever knowledge I have? Sure, I'll share it with you, which actually is pretty common in the wine industry. I think a lot of us went to school together. We share information, but my dad in particular just would give anything to anybody to help them and build the wine industry up here. So when this grower asked my dad for some Negro Amaro, I happen to know he made a great variety named called Sagrantino, and this is my mom's genetics that I inherited. I said, Dad, don't just give him Negro Amaro, do a trade at least. Let's get some Sagrantino in exchange. So he gave us cuttings of Sagrantino. We gave him cuttings of Negro Amaro, and we do normally make them separate, but in this particular vintage, 2022 was a frost year. So there wasn't quite enough of each to really want to make it separately. And so then I started exploring, well, what if we blend these? And I found just the way the two grapes, the unique flavors of Negro Amaro combined with the structure of the Sagrantino, they just came together really, really well. And so the blend, this is the blend we settled on, and it's about 54% Negro Amaro and 42% Sagrantino and 2% Cab. If my math doesn't add up, add 2 more to the Sagrantino.
Okay. What is surprising to me about this wine is when I smell it, I get earthy and spice.
Yes.
But when I taste it, there's this unexpected acid, the brightness there, and a lot of floral notes.
Yes, the earthy and the floral, I have to say, I don't see them too often together in a red wine. Those are both from the Negro Amaro. The Negro Amaro by itself, now that you put it, I don't usually even think, usually in the wine description, the earthy is up here and florals over here, separated by a bunch of other words. But it is, to me, almost like you just pulled a flower out of the ground and you can smell the fresh dirt on the roots and then the aroma from the flower.
It's like a violet or rose aroma.
Yeah, and that is, or almost like an iris. That is what I love about the Negro Amaro itself. In some vintages, that Negro Amaro, it needs a little more acidity and a little more body, and that comes from the Sagrantino. The Sagrantino has a really dark color, a lot of tannin to it, the ones that we grow here, and some additional acidity that just blends it all together. And this wine really, I think, achieves my my goal of balance. This is one of my favorite wines to show when I'm illustrating how I think I want to have a balanced wine. And I'll highlight, you mentioned lower alcohols in white wine. This wine's only 13% alcohol.
Really?
Seriously?
Yeah. So with red wines, I have for years tried to get the alcohol level down in ours, and this is one of the ones I'm most proud of, because this is 13.0, not just 13, and you can add a percent because that's what the labeling laws allow you. This is 13.0% alcohol, And it just, and with today's trends, if I can highlight a red wine with lower alcohol, even better. And in my case, this wine at 14% alcohol is not the same thing, and it's not as good. This wine needs to be at 13%. That's what those grapes tell me when they come in. They say, don't pick me overripe. Those flavors in these grapes on our soil are already prominent at 23 bricks, and it's ready to be picked then.
So good.
Thank you.
So Justin, as we get set to wrap things up, what do you want people who maybe haven't ventured out to El Dorado County to go wine tasting, what do you want them to know about what you have to offer here and the different varietals you want to highlight?
The greatest thing El Dorado has to offer is the variety of grapes we can grow. You can go to 10 different wineries, and at almost every one of those wineries, you will have a good chance of finding something that other wineries don't make or something you've never heard of before. The other thing you will find is that for all the wines that we make, the same varietals, most of us all just use Cabernet as an example, but any varietal that we all grow, it is night and day different between one winery to the other, except for the Sierra Spice common thread, which you might start picking up once you kind of find it. It's a little bit indescribable. Once you find it, you find it.
But it really stood out in this one.
Because of our varied elevations and microclimates, each winemaker really has the ability to put the grape where they want it, where it's going to, I want to highlight acidity a little more, so I'm going to plant this acre over here instead of 100 yards that way. And so you'll find as much variation amongst the same grape variety between the wineries as there are wineries. And so each winemaker really gets to tailor their wine really how they want to express it. So you kind of come up here, when you're not just trying wines up here, you're really trying the winemaker's personality and tastes. And we are not bound up here by Cabernet, or I stopped using Cabernet as an example. Falangina, for example, has to be made this way. You'll find so many different examples, and they're all good. They're all different because that soil's different, and that means I can highlight the acidity. The other one says, this is a little warmer area, and because of the soil, it might have less acidity, but then I can highlight the more delicate side of the wine and harvest it a little less ripe and show a whole nother side of the same grape variety. So that's the biggest thing you'll see is variation between wineries and between grape varieties.
Well, one thing we can't let you go without bringing up is your father, Greg Boeger, and your parents, Greg and Sue Boeger, but your dad in particular. In 2018, he was honored by the California State Fair, given the Wine Lifetime Achievement Award. What was that like for you all as a family, for him to be recognized that way?
Well, it was really wonderful because for the family, it was probably a validation of taking that risk to come up here was a good choice to have made, and really rewarded. I think in a lot of it just had to do with his generosity in sharing his knowledge and helping the other wineries who came right close behind us. We were the first by about an inch. It was like a photo finish if you're putting it in a race analogy. But my dad, shared everything. If you go to Madronia and you go in their barrel room, their wine racks look just like ours. It's because my grandfather happened to build our wine racks, and at the time when they started, they needed some wine racks, and we either shared our design or my grandfather may have even helped. So the Bushes, we go back for years and have shared knowledge back and forth. The other thing I want to say about that Wine Lifetime Achievement Award is it also brought a huge amount of laughter within our own family. And the reason why is because in 2018, it's the first year they decided to award the Lifetime Achievement Award to more than one winery or person at a time. And in that year, they awarded it also to the Boegers. And throughout the Boegers started not many years before us, but we've kind of coexisted and grown throughout the years in the industry. Anytime we're at a wine tasting, if Boeger and Boegel are both there, we are right next to each other.
Are you kidding?
No, this is serious. And it is hilarious. And you can talk to Jody Boegel. you would see people, I can remember back at Zinfandel tastings down in the Bay Area, will come up to Bogle and ask for, could I get a glass of the Walker's Inn? He says, no, that's Boeger. And they come over to Boeger, and then someone will come up to me and say, hey, could I get a taste of the Phantom? I said, no, that's Bogle. And so throughout, there's been lots of, the names are similar enough. There's been oftentimes confusion over the years. I've picked up glass for the winery that was misdelivered to Bogle before. And so when they called my dad to say, you're going to get the Wine Lifetime Achievement Award, and so coincidentally it's going to two people, that the two people are getting it this year, and the other one are the Bogles, my dad just cracked up laughing. And according to the person who gave my dad the award at the ceremony, said he had the exact same reaction when they called the Bogles and said, by the way, we're giving it to two people, and the other one is Boeger. And then they had that same reaction of laughing as well, because of course it's going to be us at the same time.
Of course.
Why not? Why try to dispel any differences? Maybe that's the final thing. Oh yeah, they're two separate wineries. So
That's so funny. Well, and it shows how good natured you all are.
Oh yeah, that's we all work together. We all want the wine industry to thrive, so we all help each other.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Well, Justin Boeger, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you and learning your family's story, your own passion for winemaking. And I think you've inspired people to get out and explore different wine countries and get up to El Dorado County, because this is such a magical place.
It absolutely is.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been really enjoyable.
Yeah, and the wines are fantastic and a great bargain.
They sure are.
Awesome.
And even visiting this region is so much easier on the bank account than other regions. So it's a great destination for anyone from Northern California, or Sacramento's not that far away. There's an airport, and Sacramento's about an hour from here?
Yeah, hour from the airport, almost to the minute.
Yeah, so we hope that more visitors discover this wonderful region.
Well, and the other great thing is you come up here, there's more to do than just
Yeah,
have
that's
wine.
right.
You can buy the wine and then go take it on your hike into the mountains or down the rivers and river rafting and just exploring nature. There's so much. There's other fruit up here that it's just a wonderful place to visit with so much more to offer.
And for ski buffs, it's not too far from Lake Tahoe.
Yes, that's true. We're only 45 minutes from skiing.
Mm-hmm. All right, Justin. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for sharing your wines and this beautiful place with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers, Justin.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Sip, sip, hooray.
Sip, sip, hooray. Justin Boeger is so darn easy to talk to and a lot of fun. And he's humble about it, but he's very knowledgeable about wine, and his family's history of winemaking in the Sierra foothills is really impressive. And you can tell the love they have for this area, and it goes into the wines that they're making.
It does. And for them to carry on the heritage that was started in the 1800s, and to have revived the property and created a new entity, yet still looking to the past and looking forward, is amazing. And, it's just so much fun being here in El Dorado County, seeing the vineyards. So when we were driving up to the winery, we passed by the vineyards up with all the gnarly, twisted vines, and it just,
you can see the history.
You really can. So this was great. And so we encourage everybody to make a trip to the Sierra foothills, El Dorado County, especially. Come to Boeger. This should be your starting point, because this is kind of ground zero for the modern era here in El Dorado County.
Yeah, and it's strange that after all these years, it still feels like a well-kept secret. But we want that secret out, because this is a great wine country to come visit, and you get a more affordable experience, a more authentic experience, and just a really great time.
Absolutely. Well, another great episode, Mary B. Cheers to you, and sip, sip, hooray.
Cheers, Mary Orland. Sip, sip, hooray.